Buluvinaka, this is a special episode on what we have in store for you as far as rugby is concerned. And of course, rugby, when it comes to Fiji, the code that is usually talked about is sevens. The abbreviated code, we have done very well in that, won 2 Rugby World Cup tournaments, and we are currently the gold medalist in the Olympic sevens, the first time ever when it was held in Rio, that magical moment back in Rio in 2016, August 2016, when Fiji won the first gold medal. We still hold that title, and of course the road to Tokyo 2020 is now in motion. And the man who will be taking us to that, on that road to Tokyo, will be none other than Mr. Gareth Baber. Mr. Baber, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to have you again.
Good afternoon, Bula.
First of all, Mr. Baber, a lot has been said, a lot has been done in the past few months. Of course, you've had a hectic season. Of course, you have had time to think about things. We had 3 titles up for grabs in 2017. We walked away with none of those titles. It was a tough ask, with teams all stepping up, players all trying their best, no doubt about that, but falling short. First of all, you had the Commonwealth Games, and it was a difficult task to take a team in between the World Rugby Sevens tournaments. Have you done an analysis how things went, and could things have been better if there were some other ways of handling things?
Yes, so obviously if you come up short of what you've put out there as your targets for the season, you're always going to look at the elements that don't allow or have prevented you from getting to where you need to get to. So obviously we've done a thorough review process in terms of us as a staff and as a playing group, and obviously a review process with the board of directors as well, obviously at the rugby union. So it was a tough ask. There was 3 competitions up for grabs, and we came so close to getting all 3, or if not just one of them, but we did come up short, and obviously I take responsibility for that. There's obvious errors in there that I've got to learn from and got to develop in terms of what we do moving forward, especially as you've just indicated, the road to Tokyo. And I look back on the season, and I'm very proud of some of the things that we achieved in that season as well. I'm very proud in the development of not just the players around me but the staff around me as well in that period of time, under a pressurised situation that we did have. And coming off the back of Dubai and South Africa at the beginning of the season, where we were still building, we were still in a training phase, which we knew we should have kept towards semi-finals. That put us in a difficult position, so we were playing catch-up almost after tournament 2, which is a very difficult situation to be. But what we managed to achieve is create momentum with a group of players who were coming together with a new captain, some new bodies in there, people learning the game as they were going through the HSBC series. And then they managed to win not just 1 or 2 but 5 tournaments.
Some very big wins. Yeah. 5 tournaments.
4 on the bounce, as we say. And that was probably the purple patch of what we were doing, and playing at that intensity and that level. But lying in wait all the time are the other teams that are looking to knock you off that, and namely New Zealand, who had our scalpers when it came to the Commonwealth Games. And I was immensely proud of what we achieved in Hong Kong, going back to Hong Kong and defending that title, which we know is hugely important, 1 for us as a group of players, but 2 the Fijian public as well. And then moving from there to the Commonwealth Games was a tough ask. We were the only one out of that top group of teams that got to semi-finals that had the same squad that went back to back. And I was immensely proud that we got to the final, and rightly so. We should have won that final, but the reality is there's a fatigue element. We played against South Africa, it went to extra time. Could we have put South Africa away earlier in that game? Possibly. We end up against New Zealand, and they just had the control on us in that game, and I think it was a physical battle that won that for them. But at that stage, we're sort of 4 tournaments in the win. 3 tournaments, we won. We came up in a final in Commonwealth Games, and we're going pretty well. Ideally, yes, I wanted that Commonwealth Games, and that hurt badly. And then it was a matter, the HSBC series, and we progressed nicely. We won Singapore, then we went to London and won London, and all of a sudden we were in a prime position. And when we went to Paris then for the last tournament, you know, I look back and we didn't change anything. We didn't look at suddenly throwing the players a different way of doing things. What had worked for us for a reason, and we were being consistent in what we did. And I wanted to see that again, but we weren't able to match those levels again, namely in an English game where, you know, we let it slip. We had it in our grasp and we let it slip. And I'm sure everybody's got their theories on it, and a lot of people will criticise me for that loss. But what it taught me, a big part, was you know, the mental capability of seeing that out and being tough on ourselves and making sure you nail it when you do need to nail it. And that's something that'll haunt me forever, because we were right there. I knew we were there. We just had to get through that game and possibly one more, and we were pretty much where we needed the points. But that's how ruthless the tournaments are, and they should be like that. It's an international competition. And then obviously coming back from that, then working into the World Cup, there was that heartbreak of not managing the end of the season with HSBC Series, and we went to the World Cup with high hopes, and you know, I integrated some players from overseas who had played in the last couple of tournaments in London and Paris for us and done particularly well, and Semi Kunatani had also played in Hong Kong and Commonwealth Games, so I was confident that they were where they needed to be in terms of the concepts we had, their fitness levels generally. Wanted to have another look at them, took them to America, and that worked well. I'd say probably the only person in there who hadn't done both things was Leone Nakarawa, but my whole thought process and planning with Leone was that he would be that 12th player that if you wanted to go and win a game, you needed a couple of tries late on in a game, that he would be the one who went on for 3 or 4 minutes.
Based on his performance.
Yeah, and he did that. You know, when he went on the field, he did that. But unfortunately, a couple of errors in the game against New Zealand cost us, and they worked us out. They did 2 plays against us, and in terms of our reaction to those plays, we didn't react well. And again, I'd say that's a mental process that we've got, and that's a big learning that I take from the season. Is we played some great stuff. You know, when I look back to Hamilton, and we were under pressure coming from Sydney, and how we reacted as a group of players, the learning that group got through that period was phenomenal, and that worked and increased from tournament to tournament. But as I said, you know, people laying in wait for you, and you've got to have your mettle about you all the time to make sure that, you know, you do get over the top of that, and that's certainly what we'll be looking at.
No doubt, New Zealand strategized well. Looking at your 15s players that you brought in, they knew they were struggling with the transition period. Do you agree with that?
I think what they looked at was a possibility of laterally, space between defenders, moving that quickly and putting a quick attacker into that space, and they did that twice in the game, which got them. What I'd say in terms of our strategy is that you build strategy off processes of steps. So one thing happens in rugby, one thing happens, and there's a reaction. What you can't allow sometimes is that first thing to happen. Once you're in that position, that first one, it becomes difficult to resolve. And they worked that. They had two scrummages which they capitalised on. But even in that game, just after half time, and Amanoni's broken from our line, he gets tackled around the 22 of the opposition, and he gets tackled at the touch. They have the throw in, the ball goes over the top of the line out, and Cali, who's been sensational all season, doesn't manage to field that one. He gets that, he's under the sticks, and now all of us at a sudden it's 19-12 and the game is different. But ifs and buts. I mean, I'm not paid on ifs and buts. I know, I'm paid on results.
You talked about mental stability.
Yep.
Now, as far as players are concerned, when you come to crunch time games, and of course we've had a lot of that in 2017, all 3 of the tournaments. You've had that in the Commonwealth Sevens, crunch time. You've had that in the World 7 Series, and you had it in the World Cup as well. Now, crunch time, the mental toughness of the players. Do you need to do some more work on that? Do you believe they're there where you want them to be?
I think you've always got to do work on that. Anybody who plays at this level or coaches at this level knows that the talent pool is very similar around the world, and we've got lots of talent in Fiji, but the next bit is the mental appreciation, mental understanding that when you go into those situations that, you know, we call it about, you know, keeping in the here and now, not worrying about what's going to happen in the future, not worrying about what's happened before. How do you control your emotions in those moments to make the decisions that you normally would make? And we train them, we take them back on the training field, and that's how we do it. We try and train them, put those in those situations. We can't always do it because obviously those situations are unique. But that's a big part of my coaching, is then going, right, you guys, there's a minute to go in a game, you're down by 5, we're camped on our own line, they've got the pressure, how do we turn this into points and make what we need in that situation, and just keep calm about what we're doing. And you know, I saw that several times. As you said, we beaten South Africa in the semi-final of the Commonwealth Games, where you know it was right on the moment. We came in extra time, we beat them.
Almost heart attack situations.
Absolutely. And you know, again in Singapore, where Alosio says, "Give me the ball and I'll score," and he goes up the field, the length of the field, and scores a try. Now, those are positives, and I've got to remember that that's where a lot of the learning happened. But then there's some of those negatives that you've indicated in terms of what happened in the World Cup, and my job is to rationalise between the two. So look, there's some good stuff over here, but this needs to get better, and I'm paid to understand how that gets better. And it's tough because 14 minutes, actual game time is only about 6.5 minutes, and in that 6.5 minutes, each individual is going to be put under pressure to make the right decisions, and you want to get more right than you get wrong for certain to ensure that you get your victory. So the mental part of it is a huge element of rugby sevens, rugby generally, but specifically rugby sevens, because of the pressure that you're under.
Now, definitely lessons have been learned in a number of areas, as you've said, and walking away with 5 tournament wins, and a lot of those games being comeback wins, which has been impressive, to make sure that we go to the next level and ensure that we get the job fully done. What do you think of going forward as far as 15s players are concerned? Of course, in the past, every time people have said, "Oh, why don't you get this player? Why don't you get that player?" Other coaches before you have also faced that. And now, going into 2017, 2018, 2019, and then into 2020, of course, the year of the Olympics. What is your strategy? To build on your own? You've got a good team that you've built and brought in a lot of good talent. You mentioned some of the players' names. Or to always also keep a lookout for others, but look at the time frame on when they come in and train with the players.
Yeah, I mean, you know, obviously I've got a HSBC series first and foremost, which you know we're going to win this year, and that's what you know my desire is for this year, and that's the mission that we've
absolutely
set out.
Certain.
Yeah, we will win it, and that's what we've set out as a group, and that's what we want to do, and we know we're on the right steps to getting where we want to, if that is we get that key point done. So I'm not really going to have an influence from anybody outside of that in terms of 15s. It was similar as I built it through last year as well. But I think the biggest thing for me in Fiji is that if you're a Fijian 15s player and you're playing in France or you're playing in Australia, you grew up playing sevens. You grew up in your village playing touch, and you played in sevens tournaments, and you played multiple sevens tournaments, and you grew. I've never been or had the ability to see that played as much as I have in Fiji, and I love it. And as a consequence, I see the transition back into sevens as easier than many other countries. In my country, in Wales, we don't play sevens as we grow up. We play sevens tournaments occasionally, but not as much as we would play here. So that's always in my thinking that you haven't got that huge leap. The biggest leap is probably going to be the physical one, and so you need to provide an opportunity where you can test that. And the season just gone, I tested that, one in Hong Kong and Commonwealth Games with Semi Kunatani, and I tested it again in London with Joshua and Semi Ranandra. As I said to you earlier, Leone was the exception. In each of those tournaments, I was pretty satisfied those guys were roughly where they needed to be. Ideally, you then have them in your camp for 6 to 8 weeks, but because of the nature of what happens in the summer and the players coming back and playing 15s, I didn't have that access. So I had to make a decision based on how quickly I thought I could get them back into what we needed. I thought we could get them in quicker because of what they'd done in Paris and London, and that was my decision. We went to America, I saw how they operated, I saw how they were around the squad, and I put that in. That model exists as a possible in the future. So I'll never write somebody off, especially if they have the qualities physically to be able to do it and are playing at that top level. Because what you got to remember, I suppose have to remember, is the boys who are playing that top level in the likes of France, that is the mental toughness that you're going to need when you come to play.
Exposure.
They have that, so they're going to expose there all the time. What I need to do is this group of players that goes through the HSBC is build them up to be those players. And ultimately, they say to me, right, coach, there's no need to get the 15s boys in because we're doing exactly
what... They have to show it.
Absolutely. So we need to win the series. So if they're winning the series and they're playing and they're developing in the way that I want them to develop, as I've seen from last year to this year, I still saw some weaknesses in some of them towards the end of last season. And hence, that's why the 15s boys came in. And that could be behavioural off the field. That could be moments in games that I'm seeing lose concentration or drop in their technique. It could be how they are around the group generally. How are they behaving when we're in camp? Though all those things, come together in a small little 6.5 minutes on a rugby field, and that's how we view it as staff and players. Everything that happens around them is being looked at, especially here in Fiji. And as a consequence, when it comes to me making decisions, I'm going to make decisions on everything I see about them, not simply about how they operate or how they have operated 6 weeks ago or 8 weeks ago. What are they doing now, and how are they behaving now? And that's what I'm looking at all the time. And I like to think I've got a lot of it right. I haven't got it all right. I understand that, and that's my big learning, is to take that and then understand how I push that back in to make the players better.
Now, just going a bit behind the scenes here, whatever you can talk about. In relation to you talking about off the field, how tough are you with them off the field to ensure that they're in line with what they need to follow?
I think that the initial bit is that you've got to create a bit of mutual respect. So as a coach, you've got to create mutual respect, and what I try and do in that is obviously build relationships with them individually, but then ultimately let them know where the line is as well. I'm not a dictatorial coach. I don't go in there and go screaming and shouting that this is what you need to do. But the relationship we have as individuals and then as a group, and how you frame up the team in terms of what do you believe is important, what are your values, how do we bring that out, how do we create a culture around you that makes you accountable for what you do, makes me accountable for what I do, and ultimately you shouldn't need to shout them at that point. Obviously on times my voice counts and I've got to let them have that. But also, there's a point of when you build a team, is that like a team here that you have, or teams in business, if you get that boss that comes in and screams and shouts at you all the time, you've got to work out, is it going to get the best out of you? Or if somebody gives you and pays you that value and that respect that you have, do I want to work for them as well? And so it's a balance between giving them the authority, and that's the line, don't stray across it, and also then this side of it, that building of mutual respect, and getting them to play the game that you have in your head for the team.
Now, a lot of people have talked about it. You would have known that people raise the issue about fitness. Definitely you've done a lot of work on fitness of the players. Can you share with us how much work did you do when people are still saying, oh, some of the players may have been unfit?
Well, none of them are unfit for a start. I mean, you can't play top 14 rugby in France, and you can't play world top level rugby and be unfit. The Sevens boys that have been here with us all season, certainly in terms of the numbers that we have for them, the plan which obviously worked through the season, how much they worked, I would say that they're all fit players. What I think we're talking about is that top level of fitness, and I'd say that probably people have got a point or two in relation to maybe some of the 15s boys that came in. Certainly a Leone, he wasn't in the shape this year that he was for the Olympics. But as I said, he was almost my wild card in it all, and I looked at him as doing something different. When we played in London, and we played in Paris, and we played in Hong Kong and the Commonwealth Games, I was certainly happy with Semi Kunatani and the way he looks after himself and he trains. And I was certainly happy with Josh Tuisova and Semi Ranrandra, who scored most tries and were player of the tournament in London. So I can understand why people say that. The rest of the group going into the World Cup, they were fit. I mean, I've got no doubts about that. And actually, the elements that we worked on at the beginning of the season, which probably compromised Dubai and South Africa in terms of where we were training and at that point in our plan, by the time we got through to the end, why did we win 5 tournaments? Why did we win 4 on the bounce? It was, to me, was because of how robust we are, how physically strong and powerful we were, and how we moved about the field quicker than anybody else, even though there was fatigue in us. So we actually got better at the second tournaments. We haven't done that before. We've won first tournaments, we haven't won many second tournaments, and all of a sudden we were doing that. So to me, that was an advance. That was where we were moving into fitness. And obviously we compared ourselves to South Africa and New Zealand and Australia, and we were doing that. We were winning the second tournaments, and I believe that was down to the work we did in the off-season, how it came into the season, and then the volume and fitness of the players generally. And that's when you bring players into the group within here in Fiji. That's what I need time to get those players up to that level, so that then they can perform at that level. Likes of Paula and likes of Joshua did in the series previously, who trained with us for 4 or 5 months before they were at the level. Terry Tamani has just done the same. He came in with us and is trained to that level. Ulayata Batanisavu doing the same. There's a little model there that when we bring players in, we like to get them physically where they need to be, so that then they can display for everybody exactly what their talents are, rather than fighting against it and feeling like they're drowning. I don't think that's a responsible way to coach anyway.
Issues like diet, do you have a stringent diet program for players when they're in camp or on tour, or is it based on personal discipline?
No, they have food provided for them which we control, and ultimately as well we'll monitor what they're eating or they're drinking, and we give them education process as well, you know, that they start to understand why they're eating what they're eating, and when they're not with us, what they need to eat and consume. You know, obviously it's difficult. I can't live in the village with everybody, but again, that's that accountability bit that we were just talking about. You know, I'm not there to shout at them and say, right, you've got to get your food, this food. They have to have that ownership, and that ownership's got to come from somewhere. It comes from the bond that's created as a team, and if they don't honour that, they're letting everybody down. And if we find out about that, then obviously discipline issues come into it, and that's some of the things that I'm talking about in terms of making selection. If I feel that that's happening and people aren't honouring what the group need, then I've got to make hard decisions based on that. But a lot of it is diet. A lot of the reactions that you get from your training is based on the combination between what we're doing physically and how we're pushing them and what they're putting in their bodies, and ensuring that they're honouring, as I said, that sort of oath they swear with everybody in terms of the team to where we need to get them.
How much work do you have to do with players who you're picking players who are coming off local tournaments? That kind of work, how much of work do you have to do with them?
Do you mean from a physical perspective or a nutritional? From a physical perspective, to get them probably to the level, it depends what position they are. So you don't always have the same battles across. But I think the biggest one is probably the power element. We have lean, fit players here in Fiji, but obviously there's a power element that exists in international sevens, which is the contacts. It's the hits. It's you driving with the ball. It's you getting hit. It's you making a tackle. And like a boxing match, you put a heavyweight against a featherweight, and the featherweight will dance around for a long time, but if the heavyweight gets hold of him, you're going to have problems. So that sort of analogies are used to communicate to the players that's why we've got to physically develop. You look at the likes of the physical development in Paolo Kula last year and Joshua Kuranambili, Kali Nasoko, lean physical body mass that is able to hit and be hit, and it saps opposition. You know, they physically get sapped just like a boxer would. So you're having those sort of jabs and those punches going in throughout every game that you play, and you've got to be able to hold it together. So we try and train the guys up to that. What I've been amazed at here in Fiji, it happens quickly, far quicker than I can imagine a Welsh boy doing it. And we can get boys in the space of about 2 or 3 months getting up to that level where we can introduce them into HSBC series and then keep nurturing them along to go and play when they need to. So it's not a quarterly, it's not like a 4-year program or anything. I think here in Fiji I'm blessed that we've got players who are physically fit, but the size and the mass and the power element is what we look at constructing in their game on top of that.
Coach, just in relation to, you've talked about players, you have a good core group of players. You also talked about developing a core leadership group that you've done with Jerry Tuwai and others. Isake Katonimbao was in that group, but he did not make it into some of the tournaments. And of course you have some up and coming players who are showing a lot of discipline, a lot of class as well. Going into Oceania Sevens, first up here at home.
Yeah.
We're defending the title. Of course, New Zealand is coming again, and then on to Dubai. How many players from your team from the previous season that has just played are coming back?
The only one who's actually left at the moment is Ronnie Sal, which we knew about, and how that process happened I thought was very mature and professional. That was good, and he kept us aware of what was happening, and I always see that might happen in the future. But everybody else is still here, so everybody else is
You must be
training.
happy with that.
I am, yes. Look, don't get me wrong. I know that these players get on an international stage, and I've been in the game long enough to know there's interest around the world, and I know there's interest from French clubs and British clubs for 2 or 3 players as well. And obviously, with the help of the FRU in terms of the contracts that these players get, we're trying to provide security around them to give them consistency and go and play. Now they've got to do their bit as well, obviously. But what has happened previously is the French or the British club has come in and trumped that with cash, effectively. You're always going to be in that situation. It's an open market. I understand that. But I need to get these guys in the right frame mentally to go on for the next 2 years, and that's what we're looking to do at the moment with those players. And equally, I need those players to be challenged by players here in Fiji coming into that group and saying, right, okay, Jerry Tuai, you might be the captain, you might be the half-back, but I want your position. And I know there's numbers of people in Fiji who think like that. So I've got to keep that door open as well to make sure that we're getting the best out of the group that's performing, because they know they're under pressure domestically, but also give opportunities for talent to come in and jump up and move on. And those are the people that obviously I look to contract.
Jerry Tuai is staying back. He had earlier said he may leave, but he's staying back. Of course, with the season going into 2019, of course, we're having the Olympics in 2020. Is there a chance of him staying on for the Olympics in 2020?
I like to think so, yes. I mean, obviously, again, Jerry was mature about the information. He had interest from a number of clubs, and has had interest during his career with me here. He's always kept us aware of them, and he wanted to stay here and do 2 more years and play in the Olympics. There's no guarantees. And I said to Jerry, he knows. He said, right, I want to go for this. And that's great. I mean, that's fantastic for Fiji. It's fantastic for me to have such a quality man and a quality player to go and do that. And that sends a signal out to everybody else as well, doesn't it? But ultimately, if Jerry did decide to move on, then what I'm looking at is this group over here to put somebody in who's going to push him all the way. And it's the natural way that things happen in a team. You're going to lose people. How quickly you can replace them is down to your recruitment. It's down to how you bring them into your group, and then push them into those spaces where they've got to go and perform. So
Alivireti Vetokani is playing very well for the Fiji Airways Ndrua.
Yep.
You've got your eyes on him?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, he played well for us last year. There were some issues that I had with Freddie, as he's known, off the field, which he seems to have tidied up, and it was go and get that sorted out, and we'll look again. And he's playing exceptional rugby. Like Mathembe played last year for the Drua as well. It's a good position. The thing with Freddie is obviously he's played sevens before, and he was good for us. And now I'm seeing some maturity in the way that he is as an individual off the field being matched by what he's doing on the field. And I think that's exactly what we want to see as coaches, and credit to all the coaches in the Drua. They're getting him into that mindset and keeping him there, and I think that's important.
Pedeli Nadembe has shown interest as well, maybe for the 2020 Olympics?
Yes, I mean, this time last year there was a chance of him coming in and having a contract. He was playing for the Drua, and I had conversations with him about coming in, and then a French club came in right at the sort of towards the end of it, and again I said, look, I can only offer you this is what it is, and he signed for the French club and went. There's only so much we're going to be able to do, and that's the same if I was in another club, for example, and he wanted to go to another club. It's exactly the same mechanism. And ultimately he's got to win his rights to play for Fiji as well. So whilst he might have visions of wanting to play sevens in 2020, then what I need to know is what tournaments are you going to play? Because ultimately there's players here who are going to be doing the job, and Freddie might be one of those. And I'm going to get on with those players because I know that then I get opportunity to mould them and develop them to what we need to move on to Olympics.
Coach, my final question, and of course this is an issue even the All Blacks are facing at the moment. You've talked a lot about that, about losing players. It's just a fact of life that when the bigger clubs are coming from with bigger budgets, much bigger budgets than we could ever imagine, and it's just incomparable. Even New Zealand, a country like New Zealand, is affected by losing some of the best of the best. How can Fiji continue to progress forward with just huge amounts of money being offered to our players, and us continuing to lose some of our very best players, the likes of Eroni Sau, who has left, who had just started to show what he's made of? How can we do that? New Zealand is talking to, when their Prime Minister went into the changing room, there was a request by players, please give more funding. Fiji is doing, the Fijian government through the Sports Commission has started to assist Sevens rugby. What more can be done? And you as coach sitting in that place, you're looking at a player who's looking great, could do wonders for you in Tokyo, and off he goes. What can be done to fix that? Or can we ever fix it?
I think obviously we've gone some way to fixing it, in so much that had we not been able to produce contracts for the 20s, for the Sevens boys over the last 2 years, you might well have seen Jerry go. You might well have seen Amanoni Nasila go. You might well have seen Chasavero Malua go. So the fact that the first point was to get contracts for these year on year, and now possibly for 2 years up until the Olympics, is a huge method by which you can prevent them from leaving. And obviously here in Fiji there's a sum of money which is going to make those players comfortable in what they're doing, gives them security around their family so they can go and play their best for Fiji, and that's what we all want. But I don't think we're going to get close to, there's not many clubs in Europe that can compete with some of the monies that France chuck around, and they're doing it to the New Zealanders as well. So I think we've got to be very careful of trying to escalate the salaries that much.
You won't be able to match it.
And you won't be able to match it. And it's not reflective of living here in Fiji either, and the cost of living here in Fiji. But what we do need is to provide security around those players that we think are important. You've got the likes of the 20s who've just done really well. You've got the likes of the Drua doing particularly well at the moment. You've obviously got the Warriors coming out under 23s. You've got the 15 aside. There's a lot going on in the rugby union. Sevens, women's sevens. There's a huge amount going on across Fiji rugby at the moment, and I think that we're sort of finding our way through on what your question is about how do we keep players in. One of the ways is to have good programs, have good coaches, have good support mechanisms for those players, have an understanding of player welfare, that if a player gets into trouble or is having trouble off the field, how do we get them back on and get them straight and get them going again. And actually sometimes it's not about all that money. I think we're always going to lose players. We always lost players in Wales. Talented players who go to England or talented players who go to France. It's a lot closer. I think you'll still get it. As I said, even the All Blacks are getting it. But I think the movement has gone towards stopping that from happening. And I think that government money, sponsorship money, has helped enormously in getting us to a point where those players are now going, well, I don't really need to go and do that. I want to stay here, I want to represent Fiji, I want to push as hard as I can to represent Fiji. And you know what, if something comes off in the future, then I'll go and do that. But at the moment, there's good programs for these people, or these players, to access. And that's important, because as a player, what you want to do is you want to try and test yourself at the highest level all the time. And also what you want is you want that support to know you can go for it. If you're always worrying about money here, or making sure that you're holding down a job, now we're going back a little bit towards what that sort of semi-pro amateur days were. And of course, all the mindsets of the players around the world now who are professional have moved on. So we need to create that mindset, or be able to create that mindset around the players, and contracting them is a big reason why that happens.
As Fiji Airways National Sevens coach, Mr. Gareth Baber. Mr. Baber, thank you very much on behalf of all our listeners and our viewers on our Facebook pages, and we definitely will have you again in the next few weeks.
Thank you very much indeed.